So, the other day I made a video about toughness, basically talking about how I find the system confusing, how I find the number kind of not super understandable, not a massive indicator of your overall survivability. I've gotten some great feedback on that video, some good support. I got a suggestion about actually showcasing what I'm talking about, and I think that's more than fair. That's a fair point of criticism. So today, I want to make a video kind of as a follow up to my previous video, talking a little bit more in depth about how toughness is calculated and the additional layers required to make your character more defensive that don't actually get counted into the toughness number. And also, I'm going to do a showcase and show exactly what I'm talking about and what influences that. I have been thinking about this, since the video. I've been testing some stuff, and I've had a couple of realizations, as well as just poking around on the forums and seeing how people are discussing it, but also just kind of like reading into like what the number says itself, and then seeing like the reflection of it on my gear. So I'm going to first establish, what is toughness? What is the calculation? So if you go to toughness here, it tells you that toughness is an approximation of your survivability for each damage type based on your life, armor, resistances, and then other damage reduction sources. That's things like flat damage reduction on your armor pieces. But the big players here, now this is a pretty big toughness scaler that I have here. Like this is providing me, a huge value here. But those main things, life, armor, resistances, and then obviously just like flat across the board damage reduction is going to be huge in determining this number. And there kind of seems to be some diminishing returns once you kind of start stacking your armor to a certain point, which is what they've described in the past would be the case. So like here I have quite a bit of armor, just flat armor. But if you look here, below I have some like disparity in some of my resistances. Like my fire resistance seems to be higher than most of my other resistances. Now if I go to my toughness scaling, and I go to my damage reduction, fire is the highest, but just below that is cold. You can see here, I have 400 less resistance than my fire, but my actual damage reduction between fire and cold is only 0.3%. So I think a good way to go about this, if you're trying to build your character out, is find some good all resistance rolls. Maybe just like one good greater affix roll, like you can masterwork a greater affix all resistance roll, and then honestly, especially if you're playing a strength character that kind of just gets a lot of armor baked naturally into their progression, like you only need like one all resistance roll, maybe two, and then you can masterwork it, and then that's going to take you pretty far. I was experiencing a lot of issues on my warlock with survivability, and these numbers, when I look at them, I'm like 95% damage reduction from all sources. It feels like I shouldn't be dying as much. So while I was still enjoying playing and kind of just like learning the system, I decided to re-roll into a paladin just because I really love the paladin, and it's kind of given me a little bit of a new perspective on toughness overall. So, like we said, toughness is an approximation of life, armor, resistance, and then damage reduction. But it is not the end-all. It is not the end-all metric to determine your survivability. And obviously, that's something that you should just, that's common sense, right? Like if you're standing in puddles, if you're not playing well, you will die if you're not dodging mechanics. There's only a certain amount of toughness that you can achieve, especially in this kind of the way this game is structured. So right here we can see a good example of this. So all resistance, the only damage, or the only value that's actually getting applied here, that's applying to my toughness, is the all resistance from the ring. I will demonstrate that by actually taking off the roll on this ring. Life regen is survivability. Like, if you have life regen, that is going to sustain you, but it doesn't get calculated. I don't know if that's intentional or if that's just how it goes, or if it's supposed to get calculated and it doesn't. But I'm going to remove the affix. I'm going to make this a white item. This still is only offering me 2.5% toughness. So I'm going to go ahead and transition into these additional defensive layers that you need to think about when you're thinking about making your character more defensive. We already touched on one briefly, skill. If you're standing in something, you will die. But life regen is, it is going to play a role in your defense. Life on hit, fortify, and I was testing this earlier. Fortify does not directly correspond to your toughness rating. I was testing this in a dungeon, and it seems like it should, because fortify is essentially an additional health reserve. So if I'm losing health, it's gaining it back up. Seems like that would get calculated into that, but it doesn't. But it's huge for survivability. Now, barrier does get counted into your toughness scaling, and I'll show you the test here. I'm using the Timetry aspect. This is actually a really good, unique aspect that you can just throw in if you're struggling with survivability, and you have a good source of like healing above max life. But yeah, all of these things play together. You want your toughness rating high, like you want that damage reduction, that all damage reduction source to be as high as it can be, but you also need to layer in like barrier. If you can use the earthen bulwark for the uptime on the barrier. It's not super sustainable, as sustainable as this unique aspect, but there's also like other like legendary aspects that you can use to generate some source of barrier. And fortify is also huge. So I'm going to go ahead and do a showcase here of the differences between your toughness when you're utilizing certain defensive layers and when you're not. All right, third time's the charm. I've tried to record this like 3 times, and I kept accidentally popping these buffs here, Falling Star and Arbiter, and it just kept throwing the number up, like scaling it really high, and it's not what I'm trying to showcase. So, all right. So right here, right now, we have a base toughness rating of 637,000. And our talisman, we have it not equipped. Timetry, which this is going to be providing our barrier, which is going to provide an additional layer of our toughness rating here. So what I'm going to do now is showcase the things that are defensive layers that are actually not getting calculated into your toughness rating. So here, I'm going to go ahead and jump over here. I'm going to wait for any like automatic toughness I have to take into play. I don't know if I have any like mechanics that are like going to be providing toughness by being hit. It doesn't look like it. Okay. So Holy Light gives me Fortify. And as we can see, if you have Fortify, no matter how much you have, it's not actually influencing your toughness rating. So if I go back over here, I put Timetry back in, and we're going to heal up to above max life. And I just went Arbiter, so I'm going to have to wait for that to go down. But I have Barrier. My toughness rating is significantly higher now. And I don't know if Dodge Chance gets played into it or not either. I don't know if Dodge Chance gets calculated. Based off of what I'm seeing, I don't think Dodge Chance is calculated either, because Life on Hit, Life Regen, Fortify is not. But you can see how much of a difference Barrier itself has. Just in its base, format here. And we can see as my barrier gets whittled down, I'm going to get returned back to like my base value, which it was like 637 a second ago, but I'm going to heal above again, and we can see barrier is actually massive for toughness. And then obviously, if I go arbiter form, that's going to buff it up even more. So yeah, kind of just wanted to do that little bit of a showcase to just detail these additional defensive layers that don't necessarily, like, aren't explicitly stated influence your toughness score, that offer like a huge benefit to your survival. And there's other, defensive layers out there that I'm probably not mentioning, like, life hit, life regen, all of those things are defensive layers, but they're not calculated. So if you're just looking at this number, it is not the end-all be-all determination of are you tough enough. And I think maybe that was kind of the lens I was going through. I was like, I'm going to look at this as a very simplified thing where, like, if I'm this amount of tough, according to Blizzard, then I should be able to do this content. Now, of course, there's like some common sense that goes into that. Like, I'm not just going to stand in a puddle and let it kill me. It doesn't matter what your toughness rating is. You will get whittled down. But I think that for a lot of people, and myself included, when they look at these systems like toughness and it being like the defining metric of like how much damage you should be able to take, sometimes it can be confusing if you're not leveraging other defensive layers that also interact with it. Now, barrier does actively interact with it, but typically when you're standing in town, if you don't have barrier on, and you don't have barrier on, you're not seeing that it's actually having a benefit on your toughness scaling. And also typically whenever you're running throughout a map or something, you're not like pulling up your character sheet, to like see how tough you are in the map. So wanted to do this video to just kind of like show that like toughness is not the end all be all scaling metric that needs to be utilized. There are other things sprinkled in that you need to leverage as much as you can, and they are as important, if not more important, than your just overall toughness scaling or your toughness rating in a lot of situations. So yeah, wanted to thank everybody for commenting on the previous video, giving me some suggestions. Doing a showcase and having a little bit of interactivity, definitely an important thing for a concept like this. If you like this type of content, if you want to see more of this type of content, or if you want me to like go more in depth about like what aspects I think might be useful in these like specific additional defensive layers, let me know. And if you like this content, like and subscribe. Hope you guys are having a great day and enjoying the expansion. See you next time.